Today, I'm going to show you the most accurate way you can track your total daily energy expenditure at home. Maybe you've heard of adaptive TDEE tracking in spreadsheets or in apps like MacroFactor. And today, I'm going to show you how you can just use your own data and an LLM to calculate it yourself. Hello, welcome to week 14, day 3, moderate push day. Today we have incline bench press with dumbbells. We've got shoulder press, seated shoulder press with dumbbells, close grip bench press, lateral raises, and then we'll finish with overhead tricep extensions. Today I'm going to give you the good news and bad news for my TDEE. I'm going to show you how I have gone through my data over the past, this 13, 14 weeks, and how I got my TDE to start, and then what the data shows my TDE is now. And we'll go over a couple different ways to find out, to extract that number from the data, right? There are a few different ways to do it. And spoiler alert, the bad news is I think that just between probably a multitude of different reasons, my maintenance calories have probably actually lowered by 300 to 500 calories from when I started my cut, which kind of sucks, but that's also why we've made some of the adjustments that we talked about in prior videos where we're cutting calories a little bit more and introducing cardio. So we'll talk about all of that during the workout and try to get out my anger for how hard the last few weeks of this cut will be now because of the lowered maintenance calories, but we'll deal with it. We'll deal with it, right? That's just what we do. We work out and we deal with things. We take things as they come. We roll with the punches. As always, we start with our warm-up. 2 sets at 50% of working weight. 1 set at 75. I've got 45s in each hand because total weight will be 160, which is 80 in each hand, but 40 in each hand seems too light. So I've got 45s. Plus, I might move up in weight. We'll see how 80 feels. We may end up just going up to 85. And I don't even know how many that is, but that feels good. If you haven't seen my other video about how to calculate your TDEE just based off of the algorithms like Mifflin St. George and Cash McCardle, highly recommend that. I give a method for how you can do that with an LLM, an AI agent like ChatGPT or Claude. And I think it's a little bit more interactive, a little bit more specific to your goals than just doing an online calculator. But at the end of the day, those algorithms are just estimates, and they're trying to predict based off of different characteristics of your body and your activity level, which is also an estimate. They're trying to make predictions about what your total energy expenditure is. The difference between that and an adaptive total daily energy expenditure calculator or algorithm, whatever you want to call it, is the input to an adaptive algorithm is actually your weight over a certain amount of time and how much you're gaining or losing, and then your calorie intake. So all you have to have is a history of your calories and your weight, and it will then try to, there are different models, different algorithms, calculations that you can use to try and figure out what your TDEE is or was at different points, and then maybe predict what it will be or should be, and then you can maybe, the different models will compare actual versus predicted and that sort of stuff, but we'll get into some of that a little bit later. All right, second warm-up set. I forgot to set my timer. I don't know if it's actually been 2 minutes or not. It feels like it has been. right. The first time I encountered an adaptive TDEE calculator was the nSuns spreadsheet. If you've never heard of this, go look it up. There's a big Reddit thread and an Excel spreadsheet, and then someone created a Google Sheets version that you can copy for free. And I think you can pay for the Excel one. And long story short, the spreadsheet allows you to enter your weight every day and your calories that you hit for every day. And then each week it will average out your weight, right? So it does some smoothing on the data for your weight, and then it calculates your calories and then uses 3,500 calories per pound of fat to figure out what your total daily energy expenditure was for that week. And then it will, over I think 4 weeks, I think you can adjust it to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, it'll get a rolling average of your TDEE. And that's going to be based off of your actual weight loss or gain from each week. And the reason that it does a rolling average is to stabilize a little bit. So if you have 1 week that's quite a bit higher, quite a bit lower, it's not going to adjust too rapidly and say, oh, all of a sudden you have a 6,000 calorie TDEE and last week it was 2,000. It's going to adjust those and average it out over a rolling period. I think the exact mathematical term is something like exponential weighted mean arithmetic or something like that, EWMA. And all that means is that it tries to smooth out any large variances, acute large variances or spikes. Before I go, I'll just say it is pretty accurate. I have seen that. I've done it at different times in my life, and I think it is a great tool, and it has helped me fine-tune my TD over a cut, because what I calculate at the beginning may or may not be 100% accurate, but then as I go, I can see how well my numbers, my weight loss numbers, and my calculated TDEE from the adaptive calculator match what I predicted with the original algorithm, and then I can see how it changes over time. And that may be due to a few different reasons, metabolic adaptation being one, probably not the biggest reason, adherence being another, changes in activity level, changes in your NEAT caloric and expenditure, and some other things. So, all right, I've talked too much. Let's hit some more weights and we'll come back and talk about some of the other methods. I don't know if I've ever done this. I actually forgot to record that lift. It was just the third set of dumbbell bench press warm-ups. We did 70 pounds, 10 reps. You didn't miss that much. I apologize if you were really counting on seeing that particular set. But I will record the first working set at 80 pounds here in a second. One interesting thing about these adaptive TDEE calculators is that they're pretty much the closest you can get to actually getting your total daily energy expenditure. The reason is because your total daily energy expenditure is based off of your activity, and it's super hard to measure someone's activity and other means. So we can measure basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate by they put a big dome over you and they measure your oxygen intake and your carbon dioxide outtake and all that kind of stuff. And they can get, yes, this is what your RMR is, or they can measure VO2 max and things when you're doing some activity, and you can extrapolate that over the day as well. But when it comes to actually how much weight did you lose today versus how many calories you ate, that's going to then give you your calorie deficit for the day. And maybe it won't be 100% accurate in a microcosm of a day, but when you look at a larger set of data over a week or several weeks, you actually get a pretty good idea based off of how many calories you ate and how many calories you burned, meaning you either lost weight or gained weight. They can figure out basically what your other activity was or not your activity, what your other metabolic rate was, whether it's all basal or based on activity or whatever. Anyway, all that to say is it's really interesting that just looking at the data is probably one of the closest ways to get the best accurate estimation of your total daily energy expenditure, and anyone can do it. All right. Not only am I going to make sure I record this next set, like I said, I'll try not to forget anymore. But I took off my shirt so y'all can admire or criticize my muscles. What are we doing? We're doing incline dumbbell bench press. We're shooting for 8 to 10, I think. Another way you can find your TDEE in an adaptive, retroactive way, looking at data, is through an app like MacroFactor. I'm actually a big fan. I just downloaded it, did the free trial, and I was able to look at my Apple Health data and see my calories and weight over the past 30 days and give a pretty good estimate that matches some of the other calculations that I've done. And so I'm really impressed with that app. I'm actually going to evaluate it a little bit more and see if it makes sense for my calorie tracking just in general. But they use a proprietary algorithm, and it seems like it's based off of some machine learning models. They do some predictive analysis and then compare predicted values against actual values. I think it's called Bayesian state space, where it's basically saying your actual TDEE is this unknown value, and then we're going to predict what it is and then measure the difference of the predicted versus the actual and compare that with priors. And it's just a fancy way of saying they use a predictive model to calculate what your TDEE should be, measure against the actual versus the predicted. And they have some really cool methodologies for handling variances, right? So they have some kind of proprietary way of making sure that spikes in glycogen and water level and dips in those don't affect your overall calculated energy expenditure. So I think that's really cool. That's one of the things that excites me most, because I know I have a high calorie day with a little bit more carbs and sodium, and my water weight will spike by 5 pounds. But my total daily energy expenditure hasn't actually changed. I haven't gained 5 pounds of water weight. And same thing when I lose that weight. I know I haven't lost 5 pounds of fat. So it's not like my total daily energy expenditure shouldn't dip and then spike based off of one day or even 1 week. And so they claim to be able to handle that really well. And I'm interested to see what that looks like over the course of a few months of that app. So that's the second way. It's probably the easiest way, probably one of the more accurate ways as well. But the next method I'm going to talk about is how you can meet in the middle and make your own predictive model Bayesian-based analysis based off of your own data. All right, second set, dumbbell incline bench. We're up. We're still at 80. We got 10 on the last one. I think maybe we should technically move up in weight, but I don't know. 10 feels like a good. I can't remember if this is a 6 to 8 or 6 to 10 rep range, or if it's an 8 to 12 or whatever. It doesn't matter too much as long as I'm tracking what I'm doing and doing more than last week. So, here we go. Oh. All right, so I threw a bunch of words out there maybe not all of them actually apply to this method. What we're going to talk about, it's not actually predictive. It's not a machine learning model. It is a statistical model. So I think what we can see is you can apply a couple different models. Linear regression, which basically just looks at points on a graph and then fits an adaptive line. We've all seen that, right? Where you've got the points on the graph going up and then they draw the line saying profits are going up. That's linear regression. The other one is Bayesian, the Bayesian model. And that is basically creates a big bell curve to predict confidence levels of the line, right? So I like using the Bayesian method because it will calculate confidence interval for a particular week or a particular day. Say, hey, this week, all the numbers match up, right? Your weight loss versus your calories matches up with what the model is saying, the expectations. But then all of a sudden I hit Christmas Day and I hit 4,000 calories and then my weight changes and it'll be like, wait a second, that doesn't really line up. And so it'll give that a low confidence interval. And we can do a couple different things with that. We can weight that value lower, or we can even choose to just disregard it completely. So my testing, I found that just on my data, it seemed like just rejecting big anomalies in weight and or calories seem to give me a better analysis. Now, when you're ignoring certain things like that, you're going to be more dependent on the data surrounding that. So you need more data, more time to be able to be this kind of have this discrimination between low confidence intervals. The less data you have, the harder it will be to build an accurate representation. So all that said, all I did was I exported my Apple Health data, which has my weight and my calories, and I gave that to the LLM and said, hey, I want you to look at the history over the past, like I said, from late October till now of my weight and my calories, and compare different models that calculate adaptive TDEE. So it calculated the nSuns version that we talked about, which is that rolling average with smoothing. It did the linear regression, and it did what we call a robust Bayesian model that ignored large outliers. And I think the results are pretty cool. I then later compared that to macrofactor, and I will try to somehow show you what that all looked like. Okie dokie, last set of incline dumbbell bench. So let me just real quick show you some of the numbers. So if we're looking at these key numbers here, Claude was the LLM I used, estimated my current TDEE as being 2,533. The average for the past 4 weeks, nSuns calculated 2416, so it was a little bit lower. The robust Bayesian, which is the one that it's using, calculated 2521 for the past 4 weeks. That's the one that said that this week is 2533. And then linear regression was 2439. For comparison, the macrofactor app is saying my week average is 2574, and in the actual like daily energy expenditure estimate is 2556. So you can see that's not too far off what I was able to recreate with an LLM with my own data for free. And I've got a fun little visualization here. You can see we've got the nSuns in like the purplish graph. Linear regression is the dotted yellow, and the solid blue is the robust Bayesian model. And you can see it kind of flatlines over that Christmas week because that was an extreme outlier. But I think what's really interesting is to see these overall kind of trend and track very similarly. I think linear regression seems to be the most kind of overreacts. You can see here this spike, it spikes more, and then in this dip, it dips more, even more than the nSuns. They all kind of end up in the same place, which I think is pretty interesting. Give or take a couple hundred, 50 to 100 calories isn't that big of a difference. So I thought that was really interesting, and it gave me this. All this is doing is showing the top graph is my weight. You can see it's trending down, and then on the bottom is my actual calories, and you can see that huge Christmas spike. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool to actually be able to have your own numbers and visualize them here. And I can have an ongoing conversation with Claude, say, hey, what if we tried with the Bayesian model, instead of just down weighting the outliers, what if we just ignored them altogether? And that's how I came to this robust Bayesian model. So yeah. All right, let's get some seated overhead presses. I've got 55 in each hand for 110. We're shooting for 3 sets of 10. Here we go. Call it 9, okay. Notice that on my Monday push day, I do the same workout, and I was able to do more. And I was surprised because it looked like the last time I had done it, I did less. And it must be just because coming from incline bench to this is harder than coming from regular bench to this. No, makes sense, I guess. You may be saying, all right, that's great, AJ. How do I do the thing? Show me how to do it. First step is to get your data out of Apple Health. So all you have to do is go here, export all health data. Yes, I'm sure it's going to export. Great. It does that, and then it asks you where you want to send it. You can email it, you can airdrop it, text it, whatever. It'll be like a zipped file. It's like an XML file. And mine was actually a little bit too big, so I had to do a little bit of parsing to get just the date ranges that I needed, but that was fine. This is also predicated on the fact that you've already been tracking your weight and your calories. So if you're not doing that, you're not going to have any data to export. So you need to have your calories with whatever app that you're using, MyFitnessPal, Lose It, MacroFactor, whatever. You need to be exporting that to and sharing that data with Apple Health. And then you also need to be tracking your weight. So you can actually do this manually. You can every day, if you're using just an old analog scale, you can enter your weight every day manually. So you don't need to have a fancy scale. If you do have a smart scale, that will help because it can sync to your Apple Health. So I think that's how I have it here. You can see the last couple are from my Oxalign scale. If you go back farther, it'll be from the Withing scale that I had before. I will need to go into MacroFactor and figure out, sometimes when you share data like across apps, you can get duplicate entries, so I'll have to figure out to do that with Lose It. It was like entering it from the scale and then Apple Health and then Lose It was entered. There's a way to do it, but anyway, you need to be tracking and you need to have data to track to be able to export. So first step, be tracking your calories and be tracking your weight. Second step, export that data to your computer. All right, let's get this second set of overhead presses. Ha! All right, after you have your data exported on your computer, you want to upload that file to your LLM of choice. ChatGPT is great. I also love Claude. You upload that file And if you have like a subscription where you can do like the higher advanced thinking model, I'd recommend turning that on. Or like with ChatGPT, they give you, so many, tokens or session length to be able to use that level for free. So I'd recommend doing the deeper thinking model. And then I would just prompt it with something like this. Given my Apple Health data, or Google, wherever you're getting your data, given the history of my calories and weight trend for the past 30 days, or you can say since October 20th, or whatever you want to say till now, I'd like you to calculate my total daily energy expenditure and compare different models. The first model is the nSuns model, based off of the nSuns spreadsheet that does a rolling average and smoothing of the data. The second model would be a linear regression model. The third model would be a Bayesian model that calculates confidence interval and down weights anomalies. Alternatively, you can use a Bayesian model that ignores low confidence values completely. And lastly, if you're able to do it, estimate as closely as you can to what the macro factor app does. Now, this is where I put the caveat, like there is proprietary. No LLM is going to be able to mimic it completely, but it is really interesting to see, like when you give it that extra context of, oh, here's someone who's doing it really well. How might I try to recreate that? And maybe they'll try combining some of the other models. Maybe they might find somewhere between completely ignoring low confidence intervals and down weighting. They might play with that. But by just throwing in that wild card, it gives it something else to think about, right? And then the last thing you could say is, just calculate a plain vanilla TDEE calculation without a rolling average. Just give me the week by week values. And that's the last thing I would say to prompt it. As an output, give me the values in a spreadsheet. I would like to see every day and every week what the calculations are for the different models and the different methodologies. And finally, I would like to see some cool visualizations. Plot on a graph the different methodologies, the different models, so I can see the differences. That's it. I know it sounds like a lot to say out loud, but it's really just a couple of paragraphs in a file that you're giving to the LLM. All right, last set. Overhead dumbbell press. Seated. Barely got 8 on that one. All right, first set, close grip bench press. I think we're shooting for 6. Oh, I was thinking 8, but I guess we'll shoot for 6 to 8. Oh, yeah. 6 it is. Now, a good LLM might ask you some follow-up questions. It might ask you what your current stats are, if you know what they are. If you know, like, what's your calculated TDEE, or what was your calculated TDEE at the beginning, or do you have a DEXA scan? Do you know your body fat percentage? It might ask you some follow-up, and that all might be good context that help it come to more accurate numbers. But that's what I love about working with LLMs is, sure, sometimes they can hallucinate, give you incorrect answers, but at the same time, since they're non-deterministic, you can influence and you can sway the conversation. You can add more detail and more context and say, actually, ignore this week because I know that is not going to be accurate. It's not going to help, or maybe downplay that week a little bit more because I know I had way more sodium because I ate tons of chips at the Mexican restaurant, right? You can do that. And you can give it information about, like I said, your body fat percentage based off of your weight. And so it can factor in how much your muscle plays into your energy expenditure, because muscle burns more calories than fat. So that's why I have a lot of videos on how to use AI to help craft your fitness goals, because I love how it's similar to talking to a coach who can adapt the strategy and the calculations based off of your specific scenario. Second set, close grip bench. I thought 6 was low, but I guess that's what we're doing. Oh, barely 6 at that. Curious to hear from you all. Have you used the nSuns spreadsheet? Have you used Macro Factor? Have you just tracked, like in your own spreadsheet or notebook or whatever, your calories and weight over time and seen how your energy expenditure has changed? I'm curious to know. Am I the only one who's kind of been sideswiped by like 400 calories less is what I'm looking at right now? When I started, my estimate was like 2,900, and that seemed pretty accurate. I was losing 2 pounds a week by eating 1,800 to 1,900 calories, 1,000 calorie deficit. I'm still eating those same calories, but I'm only losing like a pound and a half, which lines up anecdotally and statistically with what all these models are saying. Is like, yeah, you're probably only have an energy expenditure of about 2,500 now, which sucks, right? And you may say, well, that makes sense. Like, that's metabolic adaptation. And I think there's maybe some. I think especially since I've been in an aggressive calorie deficit, there certainly is some, but it's not going to account for the full 400. So there's probably other factors, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. I think the point I just want to drive home there is energy expenditure dropping is not a one-to-one equivalent with metabolic adaptation. Just because your energy expenditure, your calculated energy expenditure drops, doesn't mean that your overall metabolism has slowed down by that much. There are other factors to consider that we will talk about. Last set, close grip bench. See if we can get 6 this time. It was hard on the last set. Hard on that one too. All right, let's get our lateral raises started. So, if it's not all metabolic adaptation, what is it? How do you account for this 400 calorie loss in energy expenditure? First thing I would say is that all this is dependent on good input, good data. I am human, you're human. The people at the food factories are human. The people making the food are human. We make errors, and there is a margin of error to be expected. And all that to say is even on a food calorie label, the FDA, I think they allow a 20% margin of error. So take that for what it's worth. Secondly, I may be entering things not 100% correct. I may forget to enter a protein bar one day, or I may incorrectly estimate a certain food that I'm inputting. So maybe I don't have, there's not a barcode, and I'm just kind of guessing at what it is. Or I may be cooking a food, and when I calculate the recipe, the portions are slightly off the next time I make it, or something like that. So there's certainly that level of kind of honest errors. And there are like the dishonest ones too that really come down to adherence. And what I mean by that is like when I walk past my kids' leftovers, there's like the little bit of crust from the PBJ sandwich, and I just have a bite of that crust. That's not 0 calories, that's probably like, I don't know, 50 to 100 calories right there, depending on how much of that I eat. So I think in this later part of the cut, going into the holiday break, coming out of it, I've probably been a little bit more loosey-goosey with that sort of thing. That could certainly be playing a factor. So I'll call this one big category margin of error and adherence. That could be a big factor in why my, calculated energy expenditure does not match my expectations. We'll talk about a couple other things in a sec. All right, second set, lateral raises. It's probably helpful to define terms. When we talk about metabolic adaptation, what I'm talking about is a hormonal decrease in your resting metabolic rate, right? That's your body going into emergency mode saying, don't burn as many calories. Everyone shut it down. We gotta keep on to our fat and hold on to what we got. So when I talk about these other two things, which is your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, activity level, and body mass and movement efficiency, those affect your metabolic rate, but that would be your total daily energy expenditure. It's not the same as your resting metabolic rate when you talk about your activity and your NEAT and some of this other stuff. So I just want to clarify that when I talk about metabolic adaptation, I'm talking about that hormonal downregulation. And that probably only, for me, is probably only 50, maybe 100 calories at the most of my body going into starvation mode. And that's probably only because I've been in such an aggressive calorie cut for a long period of time. Normally, in a moderate cut of 200 to 300, 500 calories, you're not going to see much in the way of actual metabolic adaptation. I'll add just the caveat too of over short periods of time. So again, long periods of time in a deficit, yes, your body will adapt. I think it's this last set, yeah. Lateral raises, there we go. Okay, first group that might be thrown into metabolic adaptation that I'm separating out is simply body mass loss, right? I'm 20 pounds lighter than I was at the beginning. So it kind of makes sense that my, the total energy it takes to keep my mass intact without losing any would be less, right? It takes less energy to maintain 190 pounds versus 210 pounds. Now you may say, well, but fat doesn't really require, doesn't have any kind of metabolic significance. I'd say, well, yeah, there's some truth to that, but I would also say at 2 pounds of weight loss per week, I've almost certainly been losing some muscle mass along the way. As much as that pains me, doesn't mean it's not true, right? So being lighter means, by definition, it will take less energy to maintain that body weight. The second area I would talk about, and some people might group this into metabolic adaptation, is your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And that's things like walking or like fidgeting or, tapping your foot and stuff like that. And I would say for me, it may be part of my calorie deficit, but it's also part of the winter. I certainly have golfed less and gone on less walks since it's gotten cold, right? Especially after like going into and coming out of the holidays. I think there's definitely been a decrease in my non-exercise activity. And that's not necessarily just because I'm in a calorie deficit, it's just because it's cold. So that's why one of the things that I'm doing to try and bump up my calorie expenditure is to commit to going on a daily walk, no matter how cold it is. I want to make sure I get in those 5,000, 10,000 steps a day. I'm behind, so I'll just talk about these last couple of things while I'm changing weights here. Another area of impact could be movement efficiency. That's something you hear about when you're doing weight training for a while, and you're not necessarily building muscle, but you're maintaining your lifts or you're going up in your lifts. So you can actually, and this is great advice for any of you like powerlifters, you don't have to necessarily build muscle and be bulking to increase your strength. You can do that by increasing the efficiency of your movement and your mind body muscle connection. So that could be at play too. My lifts have been going up, but it might not necessarily be because I'm gaining muscle or anything like that. It could just be I'm becoming more efficient, which means I might actually be burning a few less calories. But that's why it's important to be progressive overloading, because that can help hopefully counteract some of that. So if you're just doing the same reps weight every week and your muscles and you're having that like movement efficiency adaptation, you're certainly going to be burning less calories as time goes on. So that's why progressive overload is so important, to counteract that and to also make sure your muscles are working harder than last week so that they can break down and that they can repair and build and grow. All right, so we can get this weight up to do these overhead tricep extensions. And I'm by no means an expert at this movement. I've only been doing it for a few weeks now, but I find that keeping my hands separate is actually a harder lift than letting them come together. So I get more stimulus doing that with less weight. The last thing that kind of can play into the lower energy expenditure is just eating less food literally means you're burning less calories to digest the food. You know what I mean? So like it takes more calories to burn 2,000 calories of food than it takes to burn 1,000 calories of food. So over this 14 weeks, I've been consistently burning less calories to digest my food. So though you can see there's a myriad of reasons why at the start, I probably was 2,800, 2,900 calories of total daily energy expenditure. And so it kind of makes sense. Yeah, maybe I've had a little bit of metabolic adaptation. Certainly my body weight is less, and so it takes less energy to maintain it. Certainly my activity, my non-exercise activity has gone down, probably both because of calorie deficit and because of the cold. Eating less food, so less food to burn calories. And maybe I've been getting more efficient in my movements and, not burning as many calories as it was at the start. So All in all, by comparing many different methods and them all pointing to the same conclusion, I have had to, been forced to reconcile the fact that I am no longer probably able to burn burn enough calories to lose 2 pounds a week. It just becomes unsustainable for me because if my metabolic rate, if my energy expenditure is 2,500, to be in 1,000 calorie deficit means 1,500 calories a day. And man, it's everything I can do just to hit 1,600 on a few days and 1,800 on a few. So I just don't know if I can do that for another 6 weeks. I am still going to try and commit to lowering my calories by 100. So rather than shooting for 1,800 and 1,900, I'm shooting for 1,700 on average on the week. And like I said, I am committing to my daily walks and cardio, trying to do 3 sprint workouts a week, which reminds me I need to do one later today. And hopefully that'll, make up for a little bit of this metabolic adaptation that has occurred. I'm hesitant to call it metabolic adaptation and just say like energy expenditure decrease, right? So if I've lost 400 calories, maybe by cutting 100 calories of food and then adding another couple hundred calories of cardio, hopefully I can still get to that 1.5 pounds, close to 2 pounds in the best case scenario for the remaining weeks. The day, be sure to stick around. I haven't done the check-in yet today. I will do the check-in. We'll look at the weigh-in this morning, the calories from yesterday. I don't think I've missed a day of that yet, so I want to start now. Couldn't really keep my hands apart there on that last one. If this has been helpful, if this has been enlightening or discouraging or whatever, please let me know in the comments. Consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more tips and advice and workouts just like this. Be sure to stick around. I'm going to do the check-in where I go over my weigh-in for the day, what my average is looking like, and what my calories and proteins look like. My calories and protein look like the prior day. Check-in for today, we weighed in at 187.6, which I think is the exact same as yesterday. Brings the average to 187.7 for the week. To hit 2 pounds, we need to be at 186.1. So I don't know, I guess we'll see. It seems pretty consistent for these first 3 days of the week. And I think my water weight's been pretty consistent. Haven't really seen fluctuations. Obviously, you can see there's not a lot of fluctuation there. So we'll just keep doing what we're doing. I still need to get my walk in for today and my cardio. I don't know, maybe we'll see a couple pound or a fraction of a pound difference tonight. I don't know, or tomorrow. Let's see, go back to our calories. Yesterday, 1707, just over 1700, only 152 grams of protein, so not quite hitting our protein goal. So that could be another factor in all this too. By the way, if I'm not hitting my protein goals, then I'm going to be losing more muscle, which is going to decrease my energy expenditure. But, I do what I can. I shoot for 180. If I don't get it, I don't beat myself up. If I get more than that, great. Yesterday, I had my coffee, a small protein bar. For lunch, started with an apple and a little beef stick. Then, let's see, what did I have? I just had a yogurt, some popcorn, and another couple of small protein bars and an orange. Interesting lunch yesterday. It was kind of all grab and go. I think I was on some meetings and stuff. Dinner, just a couple bowls, a couple of cups of chicken noodle soup, another yogurt, and then snacks throughout the day. I think after lunch, I did have a little piece of bread with butter. I had another beef stick later in the day, 2 sticks of gum. I usually have one in the afternoon, one in the evening. That's to help prevent snacking. That ice cream was just a halo top, a low calorie, somewhat highest protein for an ice cream at least. That was basically right after dinner. I could have just added it to the dinner because I had it right after immediately. David Bar was also right after dinner. Carrot was right before dinner to so I didn't start snacking on things before dinner. So yeah, that's what we did yesterday. Monday was 1737 as well. Really today it would be in my interest to get a lower calorie day, like 1500 or 1600, especially if I'm wanting to average for the week 1700. That means that I don't have a lot of room for as much room as I did in my buffer, right? If 1600 was a buffer before to get me into the 1800 and 1900, I might adjust my target to 1500 so that then if I go over by 100, it's only 1600, not 1700, if that makes sense. So I don't know, these are just things I'm thinking about to make adjustments to help me hit my goals. It's becoming more and more unrealistic to get down to 170 that first or second week of March, but we will do everything we can. I still think I can get below 180. I'm at like you saw 187.1 right now. So I think I can still get there. As far, I mean below 180. And then maybe what we do is after vacation, I just come back and try and lose that next, 5, 7, 10 pounds or whatever. That's it for today. Thanks for joining. I'll see you next time.